Is the value of a public education measurable by a standardized test? How about the worth of a teacher or the achievement of a student? Last week on this program, we asked the question, how do we judge student success? We turned to the theoretical and we ask now, how should we judge student success? This week on The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
I'm Ted Williams from Kennedy King College. Joining me today are special guest panelists, Stacy Davis Gates from the Chicago Teachers Union, and from the Renaissance Schools Fund, Philip Hampton. Okay, welcome back.
Thank you.
So the question we're talking about today is not how do we judge student success, but how should we judge student success? And at the end of our last show, we began talking about measurements that were a little bit more qualitative, rather than just testing on math and science, that sort of thing, but looking at the measurements for an educated person. So I want to talk in the beginning of this conversation is, in an ideal world, what does an educated person look like when they leave high school in American schools? What do they have? Who are they? What do they do? What do they know about? What do you guys think about that?
What I think right now, they look like they're looking for a multiple choice
Okay,
worksheet.
okay. Well, not, right.
What I would like for
Okay.
them to look like, I would like some analysis.
Okay.
I would like for them to be more analytical in their thinking. I would like for them to be able to connect their everyday lived experience to the larger issues nationally and internationally. And I think that we lack practice in that manner.
Okay.
We lacked communication skills verbally and also through the written word, because we're not putting an emphasis on developing a person who could potentially be the next president of the United States of America, because we know that that person has to have a deep understanding of analysis and able to balance different ideas and situations at the same time and make some concrete conclusions.
Yeah. Now, but here's the question. I'm going to ask you the question as well, but how do we measure that, right? So as a community college professor, we are oftentimes called upon to evaluate and assess things like critical thinking. But how do you measure critical thinking? How do you measure whether someone can take an idea, flip that idea around, et cetera? How do we do that?
Well, I think it's going to require that we look a little differently than we do now. Initially, you said we need to have more qualitative measures than quantitative. I love Stacy's answer at looking at students holistically. I would just expand on it by saying also, I would think that we would equip young folks when they get out of high school to be able to really discover where their interests are and to look at the potentials that they have. So as they go into college, they can develop those potentials, develop those ideas. We all have natural interests and abilities. When we have an approach where it's a cookie cutter approach, we can't help you discover those. So you may go off to college thinking that you want to be a doctor because your mother told you this is going to be our next doctor. But does it really equate with your abilities?
So would you be then against, like, for instance, the British system in which they make vocational decisions at a very early age, and they put them on a vocational path? And they've been criticized for that. I mean, the British are relatively effective, obviously, at educating their young folks. But would you be for or against something like that?
Well, I don't know if you would place them on a track at an early age. It's about exposure. I think you should expose them to the different tracks.
Okay.
And you let the individual work towards that end.
Okay. But, okay, I just throw this out there, okay? But what about the kid who's unfocused, right? Who is exposed to all these different things and they spend their lives kind of trying to figure themselves out, and
so kids like me, right?
Right? Would they not be better suited by having someone say, look, at 14 or 12, you're good at this. Let's put you on a path for this. Do we want them to make those kind of decisions at that age, or is that? I mean, I'm just interested in your opinion on those
I don't
questions.
think so. I don't think so because if I recall my college experience, a number of my friends and classmates they changed courses
Yeah.
a number of times, and it was beyond, 12 and 14 years of age. So I do think that we should help young people in that self-discovery and equip them with the ability to explore vocations and careers, but allow them the opportunity to make a change if they'd like to.
Gotcha. It's very important. It's interesting because as we talk about this, this issue of critical thinking, and that is probably more easily assessed in a place like college than it is in a place like high school, elementary school, because you've had the life experience to be able to critically think about things and bring in different experiences. And I'd like to talk, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week at all, about the issue of higher education. The United States is the second largest or the second highest number of colleges and universities in the world. The Indians are actually first in this area. But, where we fail in elementary education, high school education, America is a beacon of light when it comes to higher ed in many ways. I mean, because you can look at the sheer numbers of people that come from around the world to our universities and who are educated in our universities and go back to their home countries. For whatever reason, I guess, it seems counterintuitive in one way. It's like, on the one hand, your schools are bad at the level, but magically all the kids get smart when they get to college, and maybe it's not because maybe it's not our kids, there or whatever. So how do you guys think we're doing in the area of higher education? And what do you think we could be doing, I think, even further to measure success in that area also?
What I find interesting about how you introduced this is the connection of that critical analysis at the high school level, particularly with students who come from compromised or inner city environments, is essential, I think, to their achievement. Because you have to make sense of the craters in the street. You have to make sense of the vacant lots and houses. And so if you're never confronted with trying to figure out why this happens, and you get used to it and you don't see it anymore, then that's why achievement is harder to gauge or to measure where I work or where I have worked, is because you're not giving them an understanding of their present state and how that impacts their lives intimately, right? So when you get to college, those of them that are lucky enough to see past that and persevere and get to college, and then they start thinking like, okay, now I get it. I understand that poverty is connected. I understand racism is connected. I understand oppression and exploitation is connected to this. And then they become empowered.
Yeah.
And so that empowerment should be transferred.
Okay. But, all right, as much as I am a huge advocate for what you're talking about, truthfully, in many ways, that's not necessarily what's going to get students a job. Now, it may make them, in the long run, very valuable in whatever career that they end up in. But when students apply for a job, more often than not, they're sort of forced to display some of these lower level skills, and no one really cares about your opinion about the crater in the middle of the street or whatever, or your opinion about even global affairs. Higher level positions obviously require that. But this is a battle that we face in the city colleges because we're always wrestling with the theoretical idea of whether we ought to be a vocational institution or whether we ought to be a institution of critical thinking, higher learning, that sort of thing. And so you've worked with the city of Chicago, you've worked in schools.
Sure.
What do you think about that question with our students?
If we really examine our lives and what we've had, the kind of skill set we've had to equip to do the kinds of work that we've done, we live in dual worlds. There is a kind of a duality. And I think that we have an obligation to prepare our young people in that same kind of philosophy. So using the same example as Stacy, and I agree with her 100%, our young people in dire situations have to make sense of those, right? But they also need to be educated and equipped with and made to understand that as they work and acquire certain skill sets, that not only will they understand life as it is today, but they have a wonderful future.
But Philip, why hasn't that happened? I mean, if you look at public schools across the nation, the arts are being the budget for the arts are being slashed, and we want math and science primarily, partially because America isn't doing as well in those areas. But what you're saying, if it's true, which I believe it is, why is that not happening?
Well, because we live in our education system. Nationally has basically been a industrialized system. So we warehouse kids and we've given everyone the same program, and we've said, well, this is how you make it. And that experience hasn't changed. With the caveat that we've also provided less funds and resources as the years have progressed. So we need to look at education differently. We need to look at it in a way that we're able to translate in the minds of young people where they are and where they want to go. So it's just the entire system needs to be rethought.
Well, this is Du Bois and Booker T. Washington all over again at the close of the 19th century, right? Debating about what type of education works the best. I think that there should be selection and choice, but I think that pigeonholing a student at 14 or 15 into a one-track situation is unfair to their development, because we know that evolution is always occurring within us as people. The foundation is important, and I think that that's what you're getting at, is that you still need to know the foundation in order to survive in this world, period. However, the foundation is only relevant if you understand your place in the world and how you can succeed in this world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to be a marriage of those two ideas in order for it to work, because I think both are very relevant, because everyone isn't going to be a lawyer, and nor should everyone be a lawyer, but you still need an electrician, and you have to put work on it. I remember when I was doing my student teaching, and I was at a predominantly white school. It was a high school, and you knew everyone in that class wasn't going to college, but every person in that classroom had worth to those teachers, because they knew that someone was going to be the electrician, or someone was going to be the plumber, or heck, somebody was going to just be the person picking up the trash, once a week. So they all had worth, and I found that to be a very important experience for me, is because what we do a lot of times is put our emphasis on those who are achieving right now.
Makes sense. It's very consistent with the American culture.
It is, expediency, because you say, like, well, they got to get a job. This whole graduating and dropout rate became a hot topic when we started losing our manufacturing base. Because you always could get a job, right, before the shutdown.
Well, here's an interesting survey that was done of college freshmen in 1960. There was a poll done of college freshmen that asked, what was the purpose of coming to college? And the vast majority of college freshmen answered that poll by saying to gain a philosophy by which to live. 1960. 1990, the same poll was done at college freshmen. You can probably imagine what had changed, and the number one reason why college freshmen wanted to go to school in 1990 was, to make money, right?
Absolutely.
And so there has been this vocational focus. Booker T. Washington, we had this debate. We can talk about Thomas Jefferson and the citizenship schools. We can talk about the history of public education in America coming from the Puritans, and the moral component that was so relevant in public education and higher education, the founding of Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all these places founded by folks who were doing this for religious purposes. And we've lost that in so many ways, and I think that you can't have the outcomes that I think we want at the end of the day if we don't deal with these underlying, I think, goals. And it's very tragic. I think we're seeing this, that we've got bad goals and then we have bad outcomes. Well, we got to change the goals if we want better outcomes.